Good evening and welcome to the Clergy Cafe. YouTube thinks that it's Monday Morning Live, but we know that it's the Clergy Cafe. It's great to have you with us, and let's take it away. Thank you for joining us once again tonight in the Clergy Cafe. And like last week, we're going to be continuing on our education theme. We know that the world's very different at the moment, and we certainly know that in the world of education, it's very different. And so tonight, we're going to welcome two of our education team to the Clergy Cafe. And as we know, there's been many developments within the education world over the years, over decades. It's changed vastly. But actually, in the last few months, the last few weeks since schools have gone back, it's also a whole new, different world for our staff in school. And for us, as the diocese is actually split up into different departments. I'm within the Department of New Evangelisation, and tonight we're going to welcome the Department of Education as another department of our diocese. And tonight, hopefully, again with technology working for us. Tonight we've got Canon David Roberts with us. He is our current Episcopal Vicar for Education. Big name, big title, but I'm sure we're going to find out a bit more about what that is. And we also have Julia Cunningham, who is our RE coordinator. So it's great to have both of you with us tonight. So, just to introduce both Father David and Julia to the world, really. It's their first time on YouTube. That was one of the things we've discovered over the last few weeks is a lot of people had never gone live on YouTube before. Because before we started this, I had never gone live either. Certainly did not see my life being a TV presenter. So, Father David to start with. Father David was born in Altrincham. And in 1983... at the age of 16, he went to junior seminary. He then went to study at Ushaw College. Now, we've heard of both the junior seminary and Ushaw in some of our previous live streams. We will touch again on it tonight. Father David was ordained in 1991, and he was appointed assistant priest at St John's in New Ferry. He was also appointed chaplain to St John Pleasington Catholic High School. And just last week, we had Gerard Boyle, who is the current chaplain at St John Pleasington. Father David says that working with young people was always a highlight of the early years of his priesthood. And I think some of us might argue that actually some of the later years as well of his priesthood has been quite involved with, maybe not face-to-face working with young people, but definitely working with young people in a different way. In 1995, Father David joined the education department and was responsible for religious education of adults. In 1997, Father David began his master's degree in theology and education, and the bishop gave him the opportunity to go anywhere in the world to study for this. Father David chose Boston, where he spent 2 years there studying. Father David was appointed parish priest for the first time in 2002, nearly 10 years after his first ordination. He was almost sent home. Because he was appointed to Holy Angels in Hale Barnes, which is just down the road from home for him. Following the appointment of Bishop Mark, Father David was transferred to his current role as Episcopal Vicar for Education. Father David enjoys the company of friends and family. He also enjoys reading, watching films, cooking and listening to music. So it's great to have Father David with us, and I'm looking forward to hearing some of his story as well. Julia is also a member of our education team, and Julia was born closer to home for me. Was born in Stockport and is one of 11 siblings. That's a big family. She's the middle child, and she's got 5 brothers and 5 sisters, and we'll hear a bit more about that as well as time goes on. Faith was really important to Julia's family, and when she was growing up, they would often spend time as a family in prayer, and that's been something that's become central to her life now as well. Julia always wanted to go into teaching. However, initially, she thought she was going to go for primary teaching. After an A-level theology teacher pushed her in the right direction, she changed to go into secondary. Julia taught at Harrytown Catholic High School for 17 years, where she was also head of RE for 12. And for 12 of those 17 years. During these years, she was also, now I had to get this one right, she said SLRE. It's Specialist Leader in RE. Julia has been married for 25 years. Some say you get less for murder these days. And has 5 children. 3 of them are all grown-up adults now. However, lockdown has brought them all back together, with the whole family back under one roof. Since 2016, Julia has been involved in the new GCSE curriculum at both diocesan and national level. She's currently representing the diocese working on the revision for the RE curriculum directory, more of which we'll find out as time goes on. Julia took on the role of RE coordinator only last year and has spent 6 months of that in lockdown. Definitely a new way for the job. Things, however, are now starting to move for both the education team and for Julia, and starting to get back out around the diocese. Julia is a keen singer and is regularly involved in animation of parish music. She enjoys reading, walking, watching TV, films, and socialising with family and friends. When you look at the 2 hobbies there, both Father David and Julia have very similar interests. So, it's great tonight to have both Canon David with us and Julia and we look forward to hearing more about your stories and also about that of the education department. So good evening to you both. You are now live on screen and you have got your sound on. So thank you for joining us tonight. It's great to have you with us. And we're just gonna plough on if that's all right. And I'm going to start with you, Father David. Because as I said in the introduction, you are the current Episcopal Vicar for Education. And I'm going to be honest, I know we've got a lot of Episcopal Vicars in the diocese, but tell us what it means for you.
Well, an Episcopal Vicar is basically a representative of the bishop. The word Episcopal basically means something to do with the order of bishop. And the word vicar really means that someone who acts on behalf of. So the Episcopal Vicar acts on behalf of the bishop. And in my role, I act on behalf of the bishop in the area of education. There are certain areas in the diocese which are particularly important. And one of those areas is education. We have 112 schools across the diocese and something like slightly over 43,000 students. The church itself has been involved in schools well before that the secular world got involved. We had monastic schools. The first cathedrals were set up by the church, Bologna, Paris, Oxford, Cambridge. I think Bologna was the first, 1150, something like that. So the church has been involved in education and the diocese is as well. And so my role as Episcopal Vicar is to act on behalf of the bishop in that field of education.
So it's actually quite an important appointment then, really.
It is, yes, it is.
And tell me, what does an average day look like for the Episcopal Vicar of Education?
The great thing is there is no typical day. You've got a plan at the beginning of the day and it looks very different by the end. I work very closely with the other team members, particularly with the director of schools, which is Mr. Damien Cunningham. And we often have conversations about various school matters. My particular area, which I'll be drawn in on by the director of schools, really revolves around the Catholic ethos, RE, leadership management, formation of student teachers, newly qualified teachers, newly appointed head teachers. But often it can involve conferences, giving presentations. Often we have to be represented at national meetings. So the Episcopal Vicar sometimes is on a railway station at 6 o'clock in the morning, catching a train to London. So there is no typical day, but that's part of the role. But much of it is mundane as well. You have to go through emails, make phone calls. So that's the sort of day that an Episcopal Vicar for Education tends to lead.
And I know we'll come to it later on, but actually, you're also a parish priest as well.
Yeah, I have two parishes which I'm looking after.
So actually, spinning a lot of plates.
Indeed, yeah.
So it's great to have you with us tonight, Father David, and thank you for joining us. Julia, I'm going to come to you next. You're the Diocesan RE Coordinator. Tell us a bit about what your job entails.
Well, again, my job's very varied. I look after RE in primary schools and secondary schools. I'm the link person for RE coordinators in primary schools, but also for the RE heads of department in secondary schools. So I'll try and meet with them regularly and represent them on national boards, like NIBRIA, for example, which is the National Board of Religious Inspectors and Advisors. And I help to develop policy and support resourcing for that consistent best practice in RE. But I also support heads, for example, with this new RSE, that's Relationships and Sex Education curriculum. I've supported heads with consultation, but also in the highlighting of Catholic resources that have been produced and that can be used by schools when teaching it. In addition, I support primary schools with Catholic life and collective worship. I've got a CPD coming up very soon for primary to look at collective worship. I facilitate the Foundations in Faith course that we offer our NQTs and RQTs and staff, and also support some of the NQT process. And I also facilitate the Dada Catholic Life Group, and that stands for the Diocesan Association of Deputy and Assistant Heads. Another aspect of my role is coordinating secondary inspections, although since lockdown they've been paused, so we haven't had any of those. But like Father David, a lot of my job is liaising with various people to support those individual needs of our schools. We work very closely as an education team in regular communication as needs and queries arise.
And I think for both your roles then really it's about that ethos there that's in the schools, because I think for us as a diocese it's important that we know that we are in Catholic schools, and that when we say we run Catholic schools, we have Catholic schools, we go to Catholic schools, it's essential that they are Catholic. It's not just a run-of-the-mill school.
Absolutely.
What I know you've only been in the job a few months now, Julia. Have you even made it to a year yet?
I have, yes.
Right. So you spent a bit of time.
Strangely, though, to be fair.
I can imagine. I think it has been for us all. But before lockdown, I'm guessing one of the joys of your job was getting around the diocese and visiting different schools. What was it like a bit before lockdown, really?
I was certainly more mobile than I have ever been. I don't think I've ever done as much motorway driving as I did in those first 6 months since I passed my test. Whenever we do long journeys, my husband drives because he just likes driving. So I've done a lot of travelling up the M56. Mm-hmm. But each day will be very different due to the varied nature of my role. So it might have been meeting a head in one school. It might have then been meeting an RE coordinator in another school, but perhaps delivering induction training to governors in the evening. Or another day, I might have driven to the Park Royal in Warrington, where we certainly pre-lockdown ran lots of our courses. Getting there for about 8:30, setting up our prayer focus for the day, making sure the technical side worked, and then delivering training to primary, secondary heads, department leads, aspiring assistant heads, lots and lots of different groups.
And how is some of that stuff being done now? Because obviously the world we're living in now that we were living in 6 months ago is very different. How are the education team responding to some of that now?
Well, it's decidedly less mobile, that's for sure. It is very different working from home to working in a busy school, and certainly it has caused some restrictions, but we're getting much better at using technology like Zoom and delivering in a different way, trying to think more creatively about how we're delivering these sessions, using breakout room facilities, so that's still the opportunity for people to network, because that's really important, particularly when you're bringing schools from all over the diocese to be collaborative and to work together. So it's not the same as face-to-face. I wish we could do more face-to-face, but it's certainly, I hope, delivering the best that we can do under the circumstances.
And I suppose we've all become experts in Zoom and other platforms like it. It's not the same. It's not the same. It's been a long time since we've seen people face to face. I think that does impact on us slowly. Father David, you've been in education for most of your priestly life in some way or form. You must have seen some really, really big changes in the field of education. Can you tell us about some of that?
Well, I started off in adult education, so that's a reminder to us that education isn't just confined to schools. I think it was one of Mark Twain's characters, Huckleberry Finn, who once said, "I've always tried to ensure my schooling didn't interfere with my education." So schools are part of education, but education goes way beyond simply schools. But in recent years, I've been involved in schools and colleges, and we've seen, as you know, a great deal of changes. I suppose the academies agenda, many of our schools converting to academies, has been a very significant development, and we have to try and keep up to date on all sorts of different piece of legislation as we move through the last few years of education.
And have you been quite heavily involved in that whole academisation? Oh, I've said that right.
Yeah, some of our schools are certainly converted to academies, but not all. But yes, we have been involved. We need to be involved in that area. Most of our schools are in what we call multi-academy trusts, which are groups of schools, usually a secondary school with some primary schools. So that's very much a collaborative aspect of academisation.
And you say you were involved in adult education in the early years of your involvement in education. Does that role still exist within the diocese?
It does. Adult education now falls under the Department for Mission and Evangelization. So Father Jonathan Brandon is the Episcopal Vicar for Mission and Evangelization. So in 1997, a document came out from Rome on catechesis that very much saw adult education within the umbrella of evangelization. So that's what happened. It was very much seen within that particular area.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose for you, a lot of the work that you do now revolves around working with a team. And I think it struck me when you sent me it's through your backstory really is that you've worked with some amazing teams in your own words. What's it like to work with those teams of people?
Well, the great advantage of being part of a team is that you get a great deal of creativity. So one of the great advantages of working with a group of people from very different backgrounds, that they bring something of quality to the conversations we have. So if we've got a particular task that we're looking at, having those people around a table is very valuable. They share a similar vision of what education should be. One of the things we're missing at the moment, obviously, is meeting face to face. And no matter how good Zoom meetings are, you lose something when you're not fully present. So I think that's been one of the downsides of the COVID period. I think not being able to come together. I think we've got such a strong emphasis on the importance of collaborative ministry. Not being able to do that has been a major obstacle.
I think the new thing for this year is definitely the whole, can you hear me? Am I there? Can you still hear me? Because it is very different, and I think the interactions, and obviously when you're meeting in a room with people, it flows naturally. You can see somebody trying to talk, but Zoom with the delays and everything, it is just such a big challenge. And I suppose, Julia, maybe a similar question to you. What's this experience of lockdown been like for you as part of the education team?
Well, it was very strange. As you say, it's not what any of us expected, and certainly when I changed jobs after 17 years of teaching to do something very different 6 months in, and then lockdown. So I was initially working from home, but like many of the staff in the office, we were on furlough, so it was very odd not to be working when there were so many people around working. So I did a lot of volunteering, which was good, volunteering with our local parishes, volunteering with a local group that had been set up, to, I suppose, to feel useful. But at the same time, it was also really, really positive for us as a family. And my daughter happened to be down from London before lockdown started, and she's lived there really since she started university. So she's never been with us so long a time since she started university. She spent many of her summer terms staying in London and working for the following term. So in that sense, for us, we had to count it as huge blessings that all 7 of us were together under the same roof. So it was really lovely, very special.
And nobody killed each other?
No. I mean, fortunately, but there were a couple of occasional spats, but generally we all got on well.
I think that's one of the miracles, that we've made it through lockdown without killing each other in our household. So we've done really, really well. But I think this experience for us, and I don't know about you, but I took this job to work with young people. You're obviously teaching for so many years that actually the passion is for having young people in front of you. Must have been quite a struggle as well, seeing some of your staff, colleagues from the past working in school still during this lockdown period. That must have been a real challenge. It
was, and my husband's a teacher as well, so equally he's having that engagement, whether going into school when he's on the rota, or whether on Zoom or some other online medium. And colleagues, as you say, I know what they're doing, what they're trying to do from schools, and it was difficult really to know that I wasn't helping in the same way that I could have done.
Yeah,
but
and it's so hard. And Father David, in March we obviously got that news that our schools would be closing. Unprecedented. I don't think it's ever happened before. How was that news received by the diocese? Because I think it was a shock for everybody. But how was it received specifically by the diocese?
I think we suspected fairly early on that schools were probably likely to close. I think inevitably in the world of education, there's a lot of contacts. So I think we were partly expecting it. And once it was announced, we then respond as you would expect from professionals. You respond calmly and make sure that you're there to provide the support that's required. So although it was going to be a challenge, I think leading up to the announcement, we were partly expecting it, I think.
And how did the education team respond to that? How did they then respond to supporting schools?
First of all, the education department works collaboratively with our schools, and they, as you would imagine, they're a fine network who support one another. So first of all, it was supporting them doing what they had to do. The situation was unique that many of our schools, most of them were in fact open and providing that support for key workers, as were many schools around the country. And it was ensuring that there was somebody at the end of the phone, somebody there to support them as they needed support and help. So that was really what we're doing. This was unknown territory, so we had to really be thinking on our feet. You couldn't really plan too much, and schools were also providing online learning as well. So it was a huge challenge, but I think the department worked extremely well during that period.
And I think you mentioned planning. Planning even now is still such a challenge, and it must be the same for the education team.
Indeed, yeah. I mean, it's taking each day at a time, I think, at the moment. Fortunately, inspections aren't taking place at the moment anyway. So that's a certain burden that's not on schools at the present anyway.
And I think, I said this last week, but I think we've got to take our hats off to those who are who are stood in classrooms teaching, leading in schools, head teachers, teachers, staff, because I think they're doing an incredible job. And I mean, I've got some teacher friends and I know they're exhausted, and half term's not even close yet. But I think I think it's really important that we say it from here that they're doing a cracking job, and I suppose keep up that passion as well. Julia, how did we support? Obviously, RE curriculum wasn't really happening in schools whilst they were closed, but how did we support them over the last few months?
Well, I mean, I have to echo Father David's words, to be honest. I know that schools were closed to the majority of pupils, but schools never closed. They were open. They were open every day to key workers, and some of our schools were open through the holidays as well, to support those children. So RE was taking place whether in school or virtually, or planned materials that were being sent home. And I think one of the real positives about lockdown was the amount of sharing that was going on. It was incredible how many resources that hitherto you'd had to pay for were being released free of charge. It was incredible to see how many charities like CAFOD and Missio and Pax Christi were producing things and creating the things and putting them in a really clear, easy to spot place for schools to access materials. It was really helpful. So signposting those to schools was really important. And I was really grateful to be able to meet virtually with both the RE coordinators and the secondary heads of RE before the summer, which was a really good opportunity for us to meet and reflect on what's been happening over the last few months, and think about the ways forward. As you've already mentioned, the RE curriculum directory is currently under review. Nationally, we're moving away from assessing using levels in RE. So I've been supporting staff on this journey by laying the foundations for these upcoming changes.
And it is incredible how when changes happen, change is needed. It is needed. But how have you been involved in that change really? What's been your role in that?
Well, it came about through quite an interesting process. Various sort of doors opened for me, and as a result, one of those doors was to be invited onto the working party for the curriculum directory. It's been a really, and it continues to be a really interesting process, trying to make sure that we can have a curriculum that serves both primary and secondary, is progressive from early years right up to sixth form key stage 5, that marries up our expectations for assessment purposes with clear content, that there's a real narrative in the scheme that we're presenting, and one that's authentic and really true to our Catholic tradition.
And you mentioned Sorry, you mentioned it's going from primary through to secondary, but you actually originally wanted to be a primary teacher, and now you're going from primary to secondary to sixth form. That must bring with it some of its challenges as well.
It does. I probably feel more, even though I haven't taught sixth form, I probably feel more comfortable with that, because there's not that much of a leap from a year 11. They just get more and more mature. But it has been a steep learning curve, certainly, where primary is concerned, and it continues to be. But I'm really blessed with, I have a primary curriculum working party who are really supportive of me and always on hand to answer any queries I might have. But also I've had great welcome from primary heads across the diocese and other RE coordinators who've really been ready and willing to offer me any support that I've needed in familiarising myself with all things primary. And particularly I'm enjoying the opportunity, although limited at the moment, but any opportunity I can get to experience primary RE in the classroom with pupils. And I've really got a soft spot for early years. It's fabulous.
I really struggle with primary. I really struggle. I'm much more natural in a secondary environment. I can cope with year 5 and year 6 without a problem, but see when it goes to... I remember once I did a day retreat for nursery, and they just started crying, and I didn't know why they were crying. I really couldn't cope very well with that. But I do take my hat off to those who can adapt really easily to primary, secondary and sixth form all at once. But Father David, I think one of the things that for us, that the education is constantly shifting. There's always new information coming out, be it curriculum change, whatever that be. How do you keep up with stuff like that?
Department of Education, local authority obviously feed information to the diocese, but we rely quite heavily on what's called the Catholic Education Service, which is an agency of the Bishops' Conference of England and Wales. It's based in London, and we will get updates on important information, usually daily. So they keep us up to date on most areas of change. But there are also conferences where officers from different parts of the country come together. And so the director of schools and myself would attend 3 conferences a year, which brings together officers from around the Diocese of England and Wales, often with presentations from members of the DFE, Department for Education, MPs, Ofsted. So there are plenty of opportunities during the year and through the CES to keep us up to date on changes that are taking place. So we feel well supported by those different groups.
And I think it is important that you're up to date, isn't it? So that you can then disseminate that information to our schools.
Yeah, I mean, being up to date, but also seeing it through the lens of our own mission, which is, of course, a Catholic mission. So it's valuable having the CES who have that role specifically to safeguard our Catholic schools and the Catholic ethos of our schools.
And I suppose I've got to ask you the question, what would you say, Father David, is the best part of your role? What's the bit you most enjoy?
I know there's so many. I mean, I think particularly meeting the enthusiastic groups. I'd include the NQTs, the newly qualified teachers. There's something extraordinary about the passion and enthusiasm they have. But the same is true of our newly appointed head teachers and deputy head teachers, that coming in together with those groups do fill you with great hope for the future. And I suppose also, from time to time, I'd be invited to presentation evenings, and seeing young people being awarded for their endeavours during the school year again is a high point, where you see that they really have taken on all sorts of roles within the school, as well as academic performance as well, but not only that. So I think those are some of the highlights, I think.
And Julia, the same question to you. What would you say is the best bit about your job?
Again, the people. Such amazing, committed, hard-working people that I've got the privilege of working with on a daily basis, and knowing really that they are committed to doing the best for the children and young people in their care, so that they can have life and have it to the full. They are wonderful. It really does bring great joy.
And I suppose I'm going to ask you to nail your colours to the mast here, but I think you might agree with me that a teacher isn't a job, it's a vocation. You don't go into teaching because you want the money. You go into teaching because you love the job, you love the young people. But what would you say is a value, or what values that a Catholic teacher should hold strong to?
I mean, it's funny you asked that. The document that came out from the Department of Education and Formation fairly recently on formation in virtues, I've started to look at this with our secondary Dada group just this week. And I would say really all 7 of them: prudence, temperance, justice, fortitude, faith, hope, charity, they are all essential. For example, prudence, to ascertain the right course of action when you're dealing with a pupil behaviour, for example. Fortitude, maybe you've had that difficult lesson, have that courage to go in the next lesson renewed, it's a new day, it's a new opportunity, and it could have been a really difficult lesson, but you've got to face them again. You can't kind of run away and hide in a corner. So there's certainly a place for all of those virtues. and very much used or drawn upon, I think, on a daily basis in teaching.
And you taught for 17 years. What was the highlight, would you say, of your career? And I know it's probably hard to pinpoint one, but what was one of your highlights during your career?
I mean, they really are too numerous to count. It's the people again. This time, it's the young people you're talking about. A constant source of joy. Journeying with them as they come to know God. It really is an immense privilege. I don't think I've ever retaught a module without learning something new from one of the young people in my class. And also when you get that moment where there's perhaps somebody who's been really struggling with an idea or a concept, and then they have that light bulb moment, and that sort of awe and wonder where I've got it, I get it now. It's always like something that I've really, really loved about teaching. Never a dull day. Every day is different, and opportunities to dialogue with young people, to discuss bigger issues, and that sense of achievement, I suppose, when they walk out of the classroom and they're still discussing, they're still having that dialogue, they're still talking about it, and then you might hear from another colleague, what were you discussing in RE? I mean, they came in saying, so you know that, or you hope that something's going in, those seeds are being sown. And that really is, as I say, a huge privilege.
It was always my experience that when the young people left RE, they left with something. And there were some subjects, mathematics, they left mathematics in the classroom, but actually the RE goes with them. Not saying anything to any maths teachers out there, but Father David, we mentioned in your introduction that Bishop Brian gave you the opportunity to go anywhere in the world to study. That's quite an opportunity, but you chose Boston. Why did you choose Boston?
Yeah, there was various options, and Santa Clara University with palm trees and beaches was very tempting, but and also there was a place in South Africa that looked quite interesting as well. But in the end, I suppose I allowed myself to be controlled by my head rather than my heart. And Boston really was an extraordinary city in terms of its university network. You've got Harvard, you've got MIT, you've got BU, BC, Northeastern. You've got these extraordinary universities. And the Jesuit University, which is the Catholic University in Boston, has probably the largest Catholic faculty, theology faculty in the United States, if not the world, the largest Jesuit community in the world. And the faculty members really does read like a who's who. So in the end, Boston was the place because of the extraordinary teachers that were teaching there. I think that was the pull, really. So that's why I chose to go there.
And was there a second choice?
I suppose if I had to choose a second choice, it would probably be Fordham, which was in New York City.
All right.
So that was another very fine university for studying theology and education.
I visited Boston once, and it was an incredible city as well to be in. It really is an incredible place.
I wasn't disappointed going there at all. It had many other things apart from the university. So yeah, it was a great place to live for just over 2 years.
And one of the things you said to me that you've been given the opportunity to sort of travel to different countries, to experience different countries and different cultures, and how the church engages with that. Where's the best place you visited, really?
Well, I have to say that Episcopal Vicar for Education at the moment with schools and colleges, that does not involve international travel. But when I was involved in adult education, that was a different story. And I suppose some of the various groups I was on resulted in opportunities to visit different parts of the world. Thailand was an extraordinary experience because the actual conference itself was studying the issue of culture and faith, and there's some very fine people who presented that. So there were some very good experiences of encountering fine teachers at Manila University, where there was a very fine professor who recognized that culture influences everything, including how we eat, what we eat, even how we walk, that different cultures walk in different ways. And as this was an international gathering, he showed us the different ways that people from different cultures walk. And that brought a great deal of humor, because each nationality recognized their style of walking. And also what we eat as well. Story about somebody who had this delicious meal and complimented the chef, and then discovered they'd actually eaten snake, at which point they immediately felt sick, simply because it's a cultural thing, not because of the taste. So I think that was one of the great experiences. The other place was Los Angeles. Each year, Los Angeles have a congress in religious education, and that congress brings together about 40,000 people. They have a youth gathering as well. The youth gathering is around, again, 20,000 young people who come together. So they were some great highlights of my time in adult education.
The Religious Education Congress is certainly on my bucket list, and one day I might eventually make it out there, especially to the youth gathering, because it looks phenomenal. And I think also that where young people are at in the States in their faith is just incredible as well. But I think also for you to bring those experiences into what you're doing now is also really important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the adult education and also schools, they go hand in hand. We mustn't forget that education doesn't stop when you finish school, but it continues. And the best of teachers I've come across are those who leave the students wanting more and wanting to continue studying and reflecting and learning.
It really is incredible, isn't it? So, Julia, I've got to ask the question. 1 of 11. That's quite incredible. That's one big family. Life must have been a bit crazy in your house when you were young.
I'd say it was more organised chaos than crazy. It was really, really good fun. Had a blessed upbringing, we really did. It could be loud at times, but one thing, you were never alone. But mum and dad always had they were never well off. And of course, having 11 children, it was unlikely they were ever going to be. But home was really important to them. So they always made sure that we had a lovely home, somewhere to feel safe and secure, somewhere that we could come back to. So we were really fortunate to have quite a large house that they got for a snip, in a state of disrepair, but over the years became our lovely home. And so there was always space to go off and have a little bit of quiet if you needed it, but then you knew when you wanted some company, there was somebody there on hand. And we're still really, really close. We do love to get together and socialise. We're already starting to feel a bit sad about the likelihood of not being able to do that as we would normally over the Christmas period. But no, it was as I say, a real blessing to have, and it is a blessing to have so many siblings. My mother would always say that even when my brother was particularly ribbing me, it's a blessing to have them. You know, you're very fortunate to have these brothers and sisters, and they're only doing it because they love you. Difficult to hear when you were little, but absolutely do really connect now with those words. Obviously, when you're older, you see what she meant.
Yes.
But no, it was great. It was great.
And I think it's clear that family is really important to you. But also, I think it's important that in life you get that balance between family and work life. Has there been ever any times when that sort of tipped the wrong way?
Yes. Yes, there's a simple answer to that. I think it's probably been easier in my new role, but certainly when teaching, there were weeks where I could be marking and planning every night, and half the weekend. It was an issue, certainly, and it did make it difficult balancing that time with the family. When I first started this role, members of the family did notice that I was spending fewer evenings working, which was a real positive. What I have noticed now, though, obviously, with predominantly working from home, it's more difficult to make that sort of cut-off point that I've finished working from home. Now I'm back in the house as mum and wife. I've still got to work on that one. It's a work in progress.
And I think that is one of the new challenges now, isn't it? That actually when you're working in the office, you go to the office, you come back into work. And it's getting that balance sometimes, and it does tip. But it's so true when you are actually in the house all the time. The computer, the office is in the house, and it is hard to stop some nights.
Absolutely.
Father David, I mentioned at the beginning that you're also a parish priest. It did chuckle me that it took 10 years to become a parish priest with all the jobs that you've done beforehand. But you must spend a lot of your time between education and the parish spinning plates.
Yeah, that's part of the role, I guess. But what it does force you to do is to prioritise. I think that's very useful. The parishes I've worked in, they have often, I think, grown as a result of my double role, in the sense that, one, I recognise I need to prioritise things, but also it means that you can encourage adults and young people to move forward with initiatives. So in some ways, it's been a good experience for the parishes I've been in. Recognise I'm not there 100% of the time. It means they do take initiatives, they do get on with things, they take responsibility for the various activities in the parish. So there's a positive side to it as well. So I think that's good. And 10 years, I suppose, when I was reaching the age where you'd expect to be a parish priest, I just recently come back from the States, wanting to put into practice what I'd learnt over there. So it made sense to go full time into education. After all, priests don't retire till 75, so you've got plenty of time to be a full-time parish priest. So there we go.
Those days are coming for you. You've still got a good few years left in you, so we're all good.
A few left.
So I think also for yourself, you said yourself that the young people have always been a sort of highlight for you in your career, if you want to use that word. What was for you a highlight of working with young people?
Usually, as often, retreats are significant. When young people leave home or school and spend some time on retreat, it's often there that they are able to get in touch with the spiritual side of their lives in a way that's not always as easy outside of a retreat centre. I think another highlight, and I think Father Nick, I think you've had Father Nick on here before.
We have, yes.
Father Nick and myself, we took a group of young people to Thésée in France for a week, and that again was one of the highlights, because it gives you a sense not only of liturgy, of prayer, but you also meet young people from around the world, and you have a sense of the church is universal, the church is Catholic. I think James Joyce said, Catholic means here comes everybody, and you get a real sense of everybody when you go to a place like Thésée. And I think also the experience of the liturgy there, of that simple music, simple prayer, icons, candles, it's things like that that often enable young people to to enter those depths, those spiritual depths, that then give them that strength as they move forward in life.
And so, by the sounds of it, you might be able to have your arm twisted to joining us in some of the youth pilgrimages that's coming up in the next few years then.
Never know.
Oh, I thought I might have had that one live on YouTube there, but never mind. You're not nailing any colours there. So, I'm just also conscious of the time. We're plodding on quite quickly here. So, I'm going to ask you both a question, and it's a new question that I added last week for the first time. What's the most embarrassing moment of your career for you? Julia, I'm going to start with you. What's the most embarrassing moment of your career?
I think there's probably been a few. I can't remember sort of specifics really. I mean, there's always that moment in a class where you're in full flow and you say something and then you realise there's sniggers going around the room as there's perhaps a double meaning to what you've said. You've just got to keep going. But also, you know, falling over in front of the kids is never a good look. I do remember one time in front of a class of year 11, again, sort of mid-flow, wandering around the classroom as I always did, and just getting my foot caught on the bottom of my trouser hem and going straight down on my knees. And bless them, none of them laughed. There was a few shuddering shoulders, but I just stood up and we carried on. They were amazing, bless them.
I think young people in a classroom are incredible when something happens because of that moment of, did that really just happen? And then it seems to arrive afterwards. But yeah, hopefully your knees were all right. Father David, what about you? What's your most embarrassing moment?
Too many, Sandy, to the count, and many of them captured on videos of weddings and baptisms, etc. But no, you're not going to draw me on that one, I'm afraid, Sandy. I'll tell you what. When I've finished and I've written my my autobiography, I'll include them in that particular account. But there are plenty, I assure you.
Father David.
Inevitably, there are plenty, and that's often they're made more embarrassing, I think, because you have such a public role. So things that seem fairly straightforward, because they're captured on film and you've got an audience in front of you, they're made far more embarrassing. So I'm going to keep those embarrassing moments to myself, Sandy, for the time being.
Now you've set a challenge and I'm going to try and find some of these embarrassing moments on film as well. So this next round is called the quick fire round. Okay, last week we struggled with the quick fire round because it was a bit long. So this is a quick fire round. One answer or one word answer if it's a one word answer, or a short answer, please. So, Father David, what's your favourite book?
I think it would be The Betrothed by an Italian writer called Manzoni. And it's also Pope Francis' favourite novel as well.
I didn't know that. I've never heard of it either. Julia, to you.
I don't really do favourites. I find it really, really difficult to pin myself down on one. I've got a really kind of varied repertoire of books that I like, from classics to science fiction, works from different cultures. Very much enjoyed recently reading the trilogy by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. Apologies if I pronounced that slightly wrong. But yeah, it's too many to bring one. Sorry.
Okay. You better get thinking. What's your favourite film then?
Oh, again, really hard because I like lots of different films. I mean, I was possibly the Lord of the Rings trilogy or Star Wars, but only 4 to 6. Although I did really enjoy Rogue One of the new Star Wars.
I think it's important to see that there's a Star Wars fan in the Zoom call that nobody else can see, and he's sitting there nodding away, so you've clearly got the right button there. Father David, what's your favourite film?
I think probably Hitchcock's North by Northwest, and a foreign film, Cinema Paradiso, which is fantastic as well.
I've heard of that.
Won the Oscar for Best Foreign Movie some years ago.
And then again to both of you, where was your last holiday, Julia?
Well, it was just last weekend because it was our 25th anniversary last week. We had a very mini break overnight in York, which was very lovely. Only one night away, but it was a lovely way to spend our 25th anniversary.
York's always a good place to go. It definitely
Yes,
is.
beautiful.
I like York. And Father David, when was your last holiday?
Was in North Wales.
So we're doing the whole...
The first time I had a holiday in this country in 26 years, I think. So,
Right.
but because of lockdown, that's what it was.
Staycations are the in thing at the moment. So, at the end of each Clergy Cafe, we ask our guests to share with us their message to our young people. And so I'm going to put that question to both of you. What would be your message to our young people of diocese, to those young people in our schools, in our parishes? And Julia, we're going to go to you first on that one.
Okay, I'd say that to our young people, to know that you are loved, to know you are loved by God more than you could ever imagine that you are, and to know that you have a place in this world, a place that can't be filled by anybody else, because God has a plan for your life, and it's a plan that's filled with so much joy and so many blessings for you that you can't possibly begin to comprehend. So I suppose be open to that plan, that love, embrace it and welcome God into your heart. You'll never be alone. Even when life is challenging, as it will be, and it feels like a struggle, he is always there, and he will come to you in so many unexpected ways. So have faith and to pray, because God hears all prayers and he will answer them. And sometimes your prayer's been answered and you don't even realise that it's been answered. So whenever you find yourself in difficulty, ask the Holy Spirit to give you strength and courage, for example. The Holy Spirit has never let me down in that way, and the Holy Spirit will never let you down either. And I suppose sort of for a personal shout out from me, to embrace your learning in school, because it really is a chance for you to come to know yourself and your place in the world more and more, and particularly embracing your RE lessons, because we need more committed Catholic teachers in our schools, particularly RE teachers. So I would ask you to seriously consider your vocation in life and embrace that possibility of teaching, and teaching RE in particular.
Thank you, Julia, for that. And I suppose, Father David, the thing to say is follow that, if you don't mind, please.
I would say it's very important for our young people to find space in order to ask the serious questions, the big question, such as, what task is being given to me in my life? And you've got to plan for that. It's not something that just happens. And if you're sitting in front of a television or a computer on a mobile phone all the time, you're not going to have the opportunity to really examine that question. I think it's rather like planning to climb a mountain. You've got to do a certain amount of training, exercise. And the exercise for believers, I think, is prayer, spiritual exercises, conversations, social engagement, those sorts of things. But it seems to me you need to bring together your faith and your mission. And I was always struck by a story about a 15-year-old boy who was from Ohio, and he was driving through some fields with his father, and there was this plane that was flying over, and this plane was getting into trouble, crashed into a field, and the boy called for his father to stop the car, and he jumped out and he ran across the field, and he pulled this young pilot out of the plane. He was only 20 years old, and the shock for this 15-year-old was that he knew the pilot, and he went back home again, and he was obviously deeply upset by what he had seen. This young 20-year-old died in his arms, and that night he went to his room without eating anything, and for 2 days he spent a great deal of time in his room, because this particular 15-year-old was thinking about becoming a pilot, and he hoped the following year to buy his pilot's license and learn how to fly. And after 2 days, his mother went up to his bedroom, and there was a piece of paper on his desk, and he'd written at the top of the piece of paper, "What would Jesus do?" And he identified all the qualities of Jesus: having faith, being good, having courage. When his mother saw that, she was pretty sure that he would make the right decision. And a few days later, he came down and he said, "I've thought about it very carefully, and I've decided I want to go ahead and get my pilot's license. I want to learn to fly." And that 15-year-old boy, he became a pilot. And on July the 20th, 1969, that pilot walked on the moon. His name was Neil Armstrong. I think very few people realize that one of the reasons he was on the moon was because he had great faith. It was his faith that ultimately had put him on the moon. So I think if you look at your vocation, look at what you're going to do with your life, and join that with your faith, you can accomplish great things.
And follow that you did. Thank you very much. That was quite incredible. Thank you to you both for your words of wisdom there. And please do pass on our prayers to the rest of the education team and to those in the schools of the diocese. Don't go anywhere just yet. We'll bring you back in towards the end. But for now, thank you for joining us. And I'm just going to bring in Father Chris. Sorry, I don't know where to look. I've lost my camera. Good evening. Are you all right?
Good evening, Sandy. I'm good, thank you. Yes.
I've done it again. I'm sorry. One of these days, I'm going to set an alarm for 5 o'clock. But I could have asked so many more questions. There were so many questions that we actually didn't ask. So maybe we'll call Julia and Father David back to answer the rest of the questions. But as always, I'm going to pass over to you in Birkenhead to lead us in our reflection.
Thanks, Sandy. As we begin our time of prayer together this evening, let's make the sign of the cross. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Today in the church we keep the feast of St. Jerome, who was a priest and is now celebrated as a doctor of the church. He's probably best remembered for translating the Bible from its original Hebrew and Greek into Latin, translation known as the Vulgate. And translating the scriptures into other languages makes the word of God more accessible for more people. And this is essentially important when we understand the scriptures to be the voice of God. And then when we hear the gospel proclaimed, it is Jesus Christ himself speaking to us. So let's listen now to an extract from St. Matthew's Gospel given for this feast of St. Jerome. Jesus said to the crowds, "The kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet cast into the sea that brings in a haul of all kinds. When it is full, the fishermen haul it ashore. Then sitting down, they collect the good ones in a basket and throw away those that are no use. This is how it will be at the end of time. The angels will appear and separate the wicked from the just, to throw them into the blazing furnace, where there will be weeping and grinding of teeth." Have you understood all this? They said yes. And he said to them, "Well then, every scribe who becomes a disciple of the kingdom of heaven is like a householder who brings out from his storeroom things both new and old." Let's just reflect a little on that final line of the gospel extract. A householder who brings out of his storeroom things both new and old. And I think this is a good model for us as disciples of Jesus when we're trying to pass on his message to others, especially family and friends. The message Jesus came to earth to preach hasn't changed. His message does not change, but the way we present that message, the way we communicate the love of God to others can and does change. In many ways, it has to. As society changes, we need to find new ways to share the good news of Jesus Christ. New technology, social media, all have their place in bringing the gospel message to a wider audience. It's worth asking yourself how you can share that good news of Jesus Christ. What new ways can you pull out of your store cupboard to share the good news? So let's pray together in the words Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. The Lord be with you. May Almighty God bless you, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Go in peace, glorifying the Lord by your life. Thanks be to God.
Sorry, Father Chris, I managed to lose and have lost you now, believe it or not. Let me just select the right camera. Nope, definitely lost you. Okay, just a warning, Father David and Julie, you're now on the screen as well, just so you know. Sorry, I was having a little bit of a technical error there, and I still am. Sorry, right, so we're going to start again, because that whole bit I just did without a microphone. Father David and Julia, you are muted just now, just so you know. But I just wanted to finish off, first of all, by saying to Father Chris, thank you for leading us in that reflection tonight. But also to Julia and to Father David, thank you for sharing with us some of your story, not only your personal story, but also the work side of life at the moment. And like I said before, please do pass on our prayers to all in the education team and also those who you are working with face to face, and know that we are keeping you in our prayers too. So thank you very much for that. Father David, by the looks of it, we've timed it very well because you're suddenly just moved into the sun there. It's clearly a good night over in Hoylake tonight. It's not so nice in Stockport. But thank you very much for joining us. And so I'm just going to bring back in Father Chris. Because we're just very... I keep losing my camera with this one. I've gone over here now. Very briefly, just the next couple of weeks, I have got a confession to make, Father Chris, and I'm not sure whether confession's allowed on YouTube, but...
No, go on.
No, it's not. Okay. No. We've actually not got Indy for next week yet. So
okay.
you won't be receiving a script tomorrow, but hopefully by the time next Wednesday comes around, we will have somebody lined up. I'm sure there's a song somewhere that goes Beauty School Dropout. We've got a Clergy Cafe Dropout next week. So hopefully, I'm going to leave you in suspense next week to see who we have.
How exciting.
But as always, thank you for joining us. The week after, however, I've got another announcement. I might not be here the week after, and Lisa will be taking over from me. I'm having a couple of weeks holiday to hopefully... join my wife in having a baby, but you never know, that might arrive eventually.
How exciting as well for you.
I know, I know, it's all go at the minute, that's for sure. But as always, thank you for joining us, and I know you'll still be here, even if I'm not, you will still be here. So thank you once again for joining us.
Thank you.
So I feel like I've just, the cameras have been backwards and forwards tonight, and I'm not really sure which one I'm on. So don't forget that we are, as always, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. So please do follow us. We're actually developing some new contents at the minute, and there's a couple of new series going out. And don't forget that if you are following us, but you're not subscribing, don't forget, click that subscribe button and the little bell that rings. When you click that little bell, you will get all the notifications to say we are going live on YouTube. Hopefully next week I will sort out some of those issues, that it won't be Monday on a Wednesday, and it will actually be Clergy Cafe. Don't forget to join us on Monday morning live at the new time of 9:30. We've moved that slightly earlier to give us a bit more time during the day to get more done. So join us for that 9:30. And next week, come rain, hail or shine, the Clergy Cafe will be back next week. With who? We have no idea. But for now, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Apologies for any of the minor technical errors. We're getting better, we're improving. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.